So I hop on Twitter today. I was looking to fill out the rest of the show. And I said, you know what? Let's just crowdsource it. And so I tweeted out, what are some things in college football that are off the radar right now that shouldn't be off the radar? And boy, did you respond. I'm looking right now at my account. There are hundreds of responses here at this point. So I wrote down a few, and I just want to go down the list. This will be the most discombobulated, fragmented segment that we do all month. But here we go. Home field advantage. Absolutely. And this has not been off of our radar. If you've been watching or listening to the podcast even, we've talked about this several times. You see, in the odds-making world, there is a unique home field advantage that is ascribed to each program. Boise State for a long time had a disproportionately high home field. You would think that LSU would have a bigger one. For a long time, Boise had a bigger one. It's directly correlated to what a team performs like in your building in relation to what they perform like on average. And so anyway, I don't know exactly how much to quantify this. I'm just telling you, and coaching staffs are keenly aware of this. They have been working on it a lot, even more so than they normally would, about going into true road environments with first and second year players filling out a lot of their two deep, in a lot of cases starting at this point, and having never experienced it. A lot of times this is overblown, especially in today's college football with how good teams are at running silent. A lot of times it's overblown. This year, if anything, one of my most favorite aspects of college sports, that being home field advantage in football, could be undervalued in week one. And I say that even knowing a lot of people in the gambling community are trying to account for it. I don't think you can account for the fact that in any given game, home field could tilt a game 11 points. Well, no one in their right mind is attributing 11 points for home field. You're normally looking at anywhere from 2 to 4 points, and maybe if you're radical, you bump it up to 5 this year in a game. I'm just telling you, there are going to be some games where it's so glaring, and you look at it and you say, there's no way I could have ever quantified that this was going to have this kind of impact in this game. You're probably looking at the first quarter of the season where this has max effect. NC State, the Wolfpack. It's another program we have not spoken about on this show. They returned nearly the entire team from an 8-4 campaign last year. They had 10 guys carry the ball last year. They returned 9 of them. I mean, that's a really good stat. They got a lot of experience coming back. Stephen Muma, I think I read, put that out there. I did not research that on my own. But the question about NC State is not the quality of team. I mean, they have plenty of reason to be optimistic. I will tell you why there's skepticism around NC State as to whether they can improve on that record from last year. It's called a road trip to Mississippi State, Clemson, at Boston College, at Miami, Louisville, at FSU, at Wake Forest. That stretch right there is consecutive. That is 4 road games in a 5-week stretch. We're showing you right now on the YouTube stream. That is not an enviable spot to be in. And let me make sure, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there's no bye week in there. That's tough. That is, you don't get to see mom very often. I'll see you at the Louisville game. Otherwise, Thanksgiving, probably about the next time I'm going to see you. So yes, this is a quality team. And no, the schedule for me, same deal with Arkansas, we're about to talk about it actually, does not change the quality of team. But it absolutely could change the record, which goes to show you for the millionth time, you are not always what your record says you are in college. Speaking of records, and speaking of misleading rankings in the preseason, what about Arkansas? Because this is another program you guys brought up, and I completely agree with you. Let me pull this up. I had our friends over at College Football Unlimited today. It's a website that I partner with, and I fully endorse. You want to simulate some, tell you what, you want a gambling resource, aside from what you get elsewhere, check out collegefootballunlimited.com. I know who runs the site. Very, very quality service. So anyway, I had him do a little research for me. And I said, do me a favor, take Arkansas, a team that most people aren't expecting to make a bowl game this year, and as a result, they aren't ranking high. I said, give them Coastal Carolina's schedule. How many games would they be favored in? And CFU comes back about 15 seconds later, says 12-0. They're favored to go 12-0. So Coastal's ranked to start the year. It's because you expect them to do something schedule-wise, I'm guessing, 'cause I know good and well you are not running down the starting lineups of Coastal Carolina without checking a magazine. And so I'm asking you this. Is Arkansas ranked low and off everyone's radar because you don't think the quality of team is worth anything? Or you just look at this nightmare of a schedule that would be tough in the AFC South and say, I don't think they can do anything against that? Because you may be right on the back half of that statement, But I was looking at the JP poll, which we are preparing for release. I got Arkansas ranked in the mid-30s. A team ranked in the mid-30s, let's say 35, the 35th best team in the country, should never be in doubt as to whether they're going to make a bowl. But they are when they have to play Texas and then A&M and at Georgia and at Ole Miss. And you see that highlight if you're watching on YouTube over A&M? That's a neutral site game, which means Arkansas is going on an airplane 3 weeks in a row only to welcome in Auburn afterwards. Brutality. And then, by the way, in case that wasn't enough for you, I'm going to go ahead and give you back-to-back road games against LSU and Alabama, followed by a home game, but it's really in Little Rock against Missouri. So I'm going to give you a grand total of 2 true SEC home games in Fayetteville. I'm going to make you play, well, a murderer's row on the road. One of your neutral site games is against Texas A&M, and then the other one's at the end of the year against Missouri. Little Rock, Arkansas, last week of November. It's cold. It's damp. It is very gray. It looks like the Big Ten, in other words. And you can't skill. There's no skill in forecasting that far out. But that's tough. But my point is, that doesn't deter me from thinking Arkansas is a quality team this year, because if I did nothing more than change the schedule around and give them Coastal Carolina's schedule, all of a sudden we're talking about whether they could be on the fringes of playoff contention. Nothing changed, except the fact that we think they can win all their games. Point 101 for why you're not always what your record says you are. What about the Pac-12? Some of you wanted to point out, and I agree with this, you know I agree with this, that the Pac-12 may be way better than people think this year. Now, a lot of people's ammunition here was that there are 5, count them, 5 Pac-12 teams in the preseason AP poll, which was rumored to have been released this week, I hear. Well, that's true, but then the very important follow-up that not a lot of you attached as an addendum was 0 top 10, which is and has been and will continue to be the story in this conference until proven otherwise. You got a lot of decent, you got no great. Someone's got to flip the script. But this is going to be a fun conference to watch. I talk about the Pac-12 more than I should, given what our numbers say about it, but that's fine. I like the Pac-12. The South will be insanity this year. Arizona State was going to be many people's pick to win it, and now you've got all kinds of unrest off the field there, so no one quite knows what to make of them. But then also, I mean, we've got the odds to win the Pac-12 right now on the screen. Look at that. You've got 5 teams under plus 1,000 to win this thing. Wait a second. I don't know what Utah State's doing on there. It may be the University of Utah. Are we realigning conferences right now? I don't think we're allowed to do that. Hold on a second. Hold on. They're not. Okay. So Utah State is not in the Pac-12. As of tonight, we don't know what could happen by daybreak. But I will say this. Utah inserted for Utah State there. They got a shot to win the Pac-12 South. Arizona State's in it. USC is favored at the moment, I think still, unless something changed, to win the Pac-12 South. UCLA is there with a much tougher schedule than their crosstown brethren. That's going to be a knife fight. I don't know if anyone's going to be in contention for anything more than the division, but that's going to be a knife fight. But then, what day is this game? That November 6th game between Washington and Oregon, that could be huge for the Pac-12. What if both of the teams were undefeated? Well, that would, of course, mean there's been a monumental upset pulled off by Oregon at Ohio State. That would also mean Washington has gone on the road to beat Michigan. Really, either of those would be a giant feather in the cap for the Pac-12, but that should be a huge showcase game for them. So cross your fingers there. But as I said, yes, 5 teams in the top 25. I don't think it's radical as a concept. 0 teams in the top 10. I also agree with that. Moving on. The Big 12 coaching situation. And let's just discount Texas. Let's discount Oklahoma. This one I came up with on my own. I kind of dovetailed it off someone else's point. I think it really bears watching in the Big 12 this year what TCU is doing, what Kansas State is doing, what Oklahoma State is doing, what Iowa State is doing. Because I don't like what's about to come out of my mouth, but that doesn't change the fact that it's reality. The sand is shifting right beneath everyone's feet out there. And if you're not Texas or OU, you don't know how it ends. And right now, you got a lot of guys like Mike Gundy, like Chris Kleiman. I'll throw Gary Patterson in this. I'll certainly throw Matt Campbell at Iowa State in this, that currently reside as head coaches at established Power 5 programs. And I don't know if that label is going to be attached to those programs 5 years from now or 3 years from now. And I'm saying that to ask you, could this year all of a sudden turn into a giant interview, a giant resume builder, a giant job fair for these guys? Dave Aranda at Baylor fits this description too. I don't like that at all, but yet what do you do? Especially if there's demand for you. There would be demand for Mike Gundy. There's huge demand for Matt Campbell. Chris Kleiman is one of the rising stars in our industry. Are they staying put even as there's so much uncertainty and options elsewhere for them? I think that's something to watch as the season moves on. And some other things that I couldn't even fit in. Jahmyr Gibbs at Georgia Tech, one of the most electric players in the ACC. Had someone tell me that's the best player on Georgia Tech's team. Yes. Malik Willis could be in the Heisman conversation, could have Liberty on the precipice of upsetting someone's New Year's Six bid. Yes. The Sun Belt, led by Louisiana, but it certainly doesn't end with Louisiana. A lot of quality football to be played in the Sun Belt this year. Yes, friends, there is a lot that's off the radar that should be on the radar a little bit more. And so we're done being part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution. So there you go.